I just got a Sonos Arc the other day. Finally mounted it on the wall.
Sweet. That's the surround sound, right?
I just got the sound bar, so I didn't get
Sound
the
bar.
sub or anything.
Okay.
Because it's not pricey, you know?
Sonos is not cheap.
Bauer put me on the whole Sonos grind, you know? And I was like,
Yeah.
what are, these are expensive home pods for no reason. But now I see the appeal now.
So what's the main appeal with Sonos?
I think the main appeal for me, at least, is the fact that it has like AirPlay 2. That's the appeal. Like, it's a great sound. Like, it already has great sound to begin with. But it's like, I used to have like a Sony, some Sony soundbar, and every time I had to reconnect it via Bluetooth versus this, you can just use your Apple TV as the hub, and then everything just gets routed through there. And then I have like a HomePod behind me on my couch, so I can use that for like some surround sound, kind of. It just works well with Apple, and that is enough of a reason to maybe charge a premium.
So why not just go all app? Like, why not just get two HomePods?
I thought about that. I thought about getting two HomePods, but that would be $600
Okay.
and I found one like refurbished, and I had like a discount code, so it ended up being cheaper to go with the soundbar.
Gotcha.
And I already have, like I said, a HomePod Mini behind me, and then I have a Sonos Move in my living room. So like, for my daughter, sometimes we'll like play the sound of the Sonos of the TV, but like next to her.
So,
It's mostly just like AirPlay and just like convenience of it playing well with the Apple ecosystem.
but does it sound better? Does like the soundbar sound better? I would think it would.
It sounds better than what my built-in TV had, which is probably not much to compare it to. Again, but I have a HomePod Mini, and I've never owned a regular HomePod.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you don't really have you can't really compare.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely is going to sound better than your TV, no doubt.
Yeah,
Like
and it's not making a promise
anything.
to be like a smart speaker like the HomePod is. It's just like it's a speaker. That's what it's there for, and it just works well with Apple.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
that was
I've
it.
never owned a Sonos. Never, not one.
You should look into it. They're nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to resist complaining. But
Do
the
it.
HomePod is just, to me, kind of unreliable. There's always some gotcha with it, like especially with my Apple TV setup. I have a stereo pair with the HomePod 2 full-size HomePod 2s,
Yeah.
and it sounds good. Like, it sounds really good, but it's always like disconnecting, or for some reason the sound stops working, or
Now it's purely wireless, right? Like you just plug it into power, and then it's relying on AirPlay and Apple Magic to just like stay connected, right?
yeah, it's purely wireless. And
And it-
sometimes it'll be like, I can't connect to the internet right now. I'll just ask it like, turn the temperature down or something, and it
freaks out.
yeah.
So one cool thing about the Sonos, and shout out Stephen Robles if he's listening, because he helped me last night be my like customer service almost, because he's a
Oh,
Sonos
sweet.
he's a Sonos guy big time. So the Sonos, what surprised me with the Arc is I pulled it out, it had the power cable, but then it also had an HDMI cable that you needed to use, and I was like, this is a soundbar. Why does it need an HDMI cable? And it's because it uses like eARC HDMI. I don't know if you've heard of that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's new to me. I think you definitely. I think you mentioned it to me before what that is. But basically, I plugged it into, because I use a short throw projector, so I plugged it in there to my eARC port. So now, whatever sound that's supposed to be coming out of the projector is now just coming out of the soundbar at all times.
Yeah,
It doesn't connect via Wi-Fi or wirelessly. It's technically hardwired,
Exactly.
which is cool.
Yeah. So what's really cool is, and I'm actually, so I know we're supposed to say this to the end of the show, but I'm doing an Apple TV video where we're doing, I don't know if it's going to be quite 100, but it's going to be close to 100 tips. I decided just to go ahead and just do it, do the full thing. So
Nice.
I got quite a bit recorded already. But one of the tips is using, like you said, eARC.
Yeah.
So what I've done is and it's all wireless, which is really, really cool. So
Interesting.
I have my Nintendo Switch.
Uh-huh.
The Switch is connected to my TV via
Okay.
HDMI, obviously.
Yeah.
But you can set up the HomePod to do output for a device that's connected to your TV. So basically output from the TV to the HomePod, even though there's not a wired connection between the TV and the HomePod. Well, there's a wired connection between the Apple TV and the
TV.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting confused myself. There's so much moving parts here. So there's a connection between the Apple TV and the TV, and there's a wireless connection between the HomePod and the Apple TV.
Okay.
So basically, it's able to route the Nintendo Switch audio to the HomePods for much, much better sound. There is a little bit of a minuscule delay, but to me, it's not that noticeable.
Yeah.
And I can deal with it. But yeah, that's
cool.
So that's all coming. There's so many things with the Apple TV
So many.
It's crazy. Like, there's so many tips and tricks in here. Going to help you master that Apple TV for sure.
I'm personally excited for that one because I used to think the Apple TV was such a waste of money. Like, especially in the early days, I was like, why is this box like $200 and it has like almost no storage when my TV's already a smart TV, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I finally picked one up, and then you start to realize like the magic of the Apple TV and what it does and what it connects to and how everything is wireless and AirPlay works like magic. And again, I put my AV Fern hat on yesterday with plugging in. Like, I have my Xbox plugged into my projector, but with the eARC connected to the soundbar. So I was playing Madden through my projector, but it was coming out of the soundbar audio wise, you know. So it was like, it was cool. Even though that doesn't have much to do with the Apple TV directly, it was just, you know, I was learning a bunch of new things yesterday, which I didn't know.
So you mentioned a short throw projector.
Mm-hmm.
What is that 1080p or is that 4K?
It's 4K.
Or is it one of those 4K like like it's not actually 4K, it uses pixel shift?
No, so it's a legit 4K one. I'm actually, so after your video, I'm going to take those tips and then I'm making a video of my smart home living room tour because it's a beautiful projector. This is the first time I've gotten, because short throw projectors are kind of pricey. So
yeah,
so
what is it?
BenQ sent one over to kind of play with, review, with no promise of content, which is awesome. Shout out to BenQ. And I've just been in love. I've been using it for months, and it has a built-in speaker, so that's what I was using to begin with. And then I connected an Apple TV to it. Then I got the sound bar. You know, now I got my video. I got my Xbox plugged into it, and it's 100 inches, man. It's crazy. It's funny how we just started on this tangent, but this is cool. I have the, like, I guess like the canvas or kind of like the screen that's mounted on there to make it look way better during the day. Because during the day, if you don't have that, like, I forget what it's called. I'll get the technical term for it once I make the video. It's not gonna look good. It looks weird.
Yeah.
Even on a white painted wall. But at night it looks beautiful, and now with that on during the day it still looks good. And I have an advantage because my TV is kind of like, or my setup is kind of in a little nook. So even though I have natural light coming in, the nook kind of blocks that natural light a little bit. So it works perfectly for a short throw projector.
Nice thing about short throw projectors is you don't have to like mount it way back if you don't have a lot of space, and it probably is going to have better like luminance, I would guess, because it's so close.
Yeah.
Like brighter, it'll be brighter.
So it is bright.
Yeah.
It's nice.
So yeah, we did go on a little tangent there, which we tend to do.
But I did want to kind of, because we haven't really talked about it, even though it's been in the news a lot, all this AI hardware stuff that's been happening. I mean, I don't think either of us have gotten our hands on either the Humane Pin or the Rabbit R1. But I kind of just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what your thoughts are on all the AI hardware that's been happening. Is it something that you would get into? What have you seen in terms of the reviews, and what kind of opinion have you kind of created for yourself? Because it's something I'm relatively curious about overall. So I'm curious to know what you got to say.
I think the reviews have been pretty much spot on as to like what I was thinking. These are products. They're number one. They're unfinished products, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's becoming more and more of a trend. So they're not finished products when they're shipping these out. Like, why would you ship something that needs a software update to super prominent reviewers?
Yeah.
Like, why not just wait a week until you get like the latest and greatest update out? So that's a whole nother thing though. My first thought is it seems unnecessary with smartphones. Like, these devices are, some even have claimed to be able to like replace a smartphone, which obviously is ridiculous.
I mean, that was the whole, I think the whole appeal of the Humane one specifically was that their vision was to replace the smartphone. Like, they think screen time is too much, people are using their phones too much, they're not interacting like humans anymore, hence the name of the company. So I guess I see that in terms of what their ultimate vision is. But yeah, the actual, once they boiled it down to a hardware product, like you said, it was there's a lot that was missing, obviously.
Yeah. on the surface, it's a cool idea, especially
Hmm.
the humane one definitely appeals to me more than the rabbit R1.
Yeah,
Like, not even
for sure.
close. The rabbit R1 to me is pretty much it.
It's like a little
Like,
plastic toy. I don't know.
so the biggest redeeming factor of that device is the fact that Teenage Engineering
Yeah.
was the one who created it. And that's a company that I've been a big fan of for a very long time. They make awesome audio hardware.
Hmm.
Just a really cool company that just makes
Sick
super
products.
whimsical.
Yeah,
They make whimsical products,
it's a
right?
great
Like
word.
the design. Yeah. So, but besides that, it's like, okay, if you're going to create a product that you want people to use outside of their smartphone, then it shouldn't look like a smartphone. It shouldn't function like a smartphone. Like
Yeah,
the Rabbit R1 is too close in the form factor of a smartphone. You actually
yeah,
have to physically hold it in your hand like a smartphone.
yeah.
It has a big, fairly large display like a smartphone. It's
Hmm.
touch screen like a smartphone. Like,
Yeah,
why would I use that instead of my smartphone? And it is vastly inferior to its capabilities
hmm.
versus a smartphone, right? So that's the biggest thing for me. The redeeming factor of the Rabbit is that I don't believe there's a monthly like subscription charge, and it's fairly cheap.
And I think that was the reason why I want to say they like rushed to market because they were like, hey, Humane Pin is getting all this negative publicity at $800 with the membership. We're coming down at a quarter of the price, and all we need to do is you got to go get a SIM card so you can pay $10-15 a month for that. And I don't know, it's just like they tried to do a quick money grab before Google and then Apple put their best foot forward and figured out what they're going to do in the AI space. So they felt like they had this window to capitalize on in terms of the market, and they're like, all right, even though it's unfinished, let's get it out to people and promise them that we'll finish it later and see what people say. Which I thought, I don't know, from a morality standpoint, I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like you said earlier, it's been a growing trend to have these products come out when they're not finished yet, and especially for these companies that are startups where they're VC backed and they have all this money, and again, they also want to put their best foot forward initially and get a good first impression. I think they just like went about it incorrectly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think so too. My biggest beef with this thing is like, don't create something in the form factor of a smartphone. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to carry two devices that look like that function more or less the same.
Hmm.
Like, granted, there's differences there, but I want something. If I'm going to carry something else with me, I don't want to actually have to physically hold it for one thing. Like,
Yeah.
it needs to be something that either, like the Apple Watch, which I'm not wearing, that attaches to your wrist, a ring like the
Yeah.
Aura ring, right? Or glasses, like even Meta's Ray-Ban
Yeah. The Ray Ban
glasses
glasses.
are pretty cool. Or the Humane Pin, like
Hmm.
all those things are designed so you don't have to hold them like a smartphone.
Yeah.
Like they just kind of passively sit there and do their thing. Some to a greater degree, some to a lesser degree, but at least it's a different form factor. Whereas the Rabbit or anything like that, to me, it's just like, why not just use your smartphone?
Yeah.
Eventually, Apple and Google are going to get to the point where they have AI built in. It has cameras. They're super high resolution. They're better than any camera that any of these other devices have. Better microphones.
Hmm.
Just a better overall functioning device. Better battery, and it can do everything else. It's your
Yeah.
computer as well. So it's like, yeah, wait for Apple and Google to to ship their AI that will run circles
Yeah.
around
And like
these products.
I agree with the R1. It seems more of like a novelty product. I almost compare it to like buying an analog pocket. It just like kind of looks a little bit different. It kind of does some things that your smartphone does. Like let me pull it out to have a conversation about it with somebody else. And I think that's like what the appeal is. It looks like a cool device. Like I wouldn't mind having it just like on my desk as a paperweight, something as a background to a video or something like that. The biggest selling point to them was like what they're promising down the road in their roadmap, like the large action model for it to like actually be able to order an Uber for you or buy a plane ticket for you and things like that. But the way that they're doing it is very interesting. I don't know if you've seen like the actual tech behind it, where it's not integrating into the applications themselves. It's literally like pretending to be you virtually in a virtual machine, which is wild. So it's like learning where buttons are in certain UI and certain websites, and then physically or virtually clicking for you different aspects of that UI, which is weird. So I don't know. It's like, but how's it gonna get past the "I'm not a robot" section? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just like a weird
that's
situation. Cool in theory, but again, I'm not gonna complain or be negative. But let's see. I guess let's just see what happens at the end of the day with those things. But I do think the Humane AI pin is gonna be something that might get a couple more iterations before the R1 does.
yeah, I could see that. I think Humane's one of their biggest mistakes. Number one, the price, right?
Yeah.
And the design of it is it's a well designed device,
Mm-hmm.
but that made the price go up. And then you have a monthly charge, like a monthly subscription fee, which,
Yeah.
but on top of that, the device didn't seem to work all that well.
Yeah. I mean, they tried. They did some cool stuff with like the laser projector. I thought it was, again, in
I thought it was
theory, I thought it
cool.
was very
Yeah,
cool. And the way that you interact
yeah,
with it by like pulling forward and moving closer and moving your hand around. I definitely want to get my hands on one, or at least play with somebody else's just to see what that's like. But yeah, like you said, it's from all the reviews we've seen, it's just not delivering on the promise of being like that AI assistant that is quicker than a Google Assistant or a Siri or even like Bixby, you know? So,
well, I'll just cap it off with this. I will say, like you mentioned, the Humane looks far vastly more interesting
mhm.
than the R1. I felt bad for them when I was like reading some of these reviews and watching some of these reviews because I do know that they seem to really have put a lot of like effort into it.
Yeah,
Like there's a lot of thought behind this interface. It's unique. It
yeah,
is what's the word for it? It's innovative.
hmm,
Like it's not something you see like it this is an innovative product. I think they
yeah,
have something there, but it's just wasn't ready yet.
hmm,
I just don't think it was ready yet, and I think some of the decisions and some of the marketing was a little off.
yeah,
But I think it's a really cool device in theory.
yeah. The modularity of the batteries, being able to, just pin it to yourself and different aspects of it. I agree. I think a lot of money, time, and brain power went into that thing, and you can tell for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah,
a matter of it's got to do the simple things correctly. It's got to be faster and it's got to be more, I guess, intelligent than what you already have in your pocket, right? If it doesn't accomplish that, then it's like why not just use your AirPods and say, hey blank, what's the weather today? Hey,
yeah, and the fact
remind
that
me to
it
do
didn't,
this, things like that.
yeah, just like you were saying, the fact that it doesn't integrate with your smartphone,
Hmm.
like that. And I understand that they think this is going to replace it, but it's not. Like no one's going to leave their smartphone at home.
No,
Yeah, we're
we're not
far away
there.
from that.
We're way too far
Yeah,
away from that. We're
yeah.
closer to having Vision Pros on our faces than leaving our smartphones at home. But that is I guess that's a little segue into thinking like how do you think Apple's going to approach this? Because we are getting some rumors that the M4 chip is going to be in the iPad Pro when it releases, and there's going to be some sort of AI implementation or machine learning or some neural network in there that's going to, I guess, compete or give us some sort of new product category for Apple in terms of the software space. So I wonder what Apple's going to do.
The M3 was already touted as like being like good for AI,
Mm-hmm.
and that's already shipped. Here's the thing, like you mentioned, the software. We're waiting on the software, so doesn't matter what type of hardware they ship until the software is there and ready to use, which it won't be until after WWDC. Then we'll just have to wait and see. But
Yeah.
it appears that the M4 is greater optimized or will be greater optimized for AI. You can bet that the neural engine will be a big focus for that. But I think Apple's implementation is going to be simple. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be straightforward. It's going to be on device.
Yeah.
It's going to be secure. And it's going to be easy to use. And I think it's really because, I mean, you mentioned Chat GPT to the average person on the street. They have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if they do, they have no idea how to use it or take
Mm-hmm.
advantage of it. So I think what Apple's going to do, they're going to take that idea and package it in such a way with Siri, of course,
Yeah.
that makes it easy to use and people find how it can actually be practical in their
Yeah.
lives.
I think it's going to be one of those things where I think iOS or Apple users, they're not going to know they're using it. That's how Apple's going to implement it. I think it's going to make their to-do list easier or their notes easier. It's going to integrate across the native apps without you even knowing that it's being integrated. Like It'll let you know. I mean, I think Maps already does something like this, but along the same lines as, hey, you should leave for work in 30 minutes because of traffic and things like that. So I think Apple's just going to capitalize on that. And again, just make it very bare bones and very simple while adding value and making the quality of life of the ownership of whatever device you're using, their AI, whatever they're going to call it. It's just going to make it easier. I'm just curious to know if maybe Apple charges more for it or adds it to Apple One or calls it like Siri Plus or something like that, or Siri Pro. That I could see Apple doing. So just
Siri Pro.
be careful. Well, I've always assumed Apple would get into it at some point, similar to how they deal with hardware features and things like that. They wait until somebody else does it, and then Apple does it their way, a year, 2, 3, 4 years later. And I think this is going to be no different. Apple's just going to have to figure out a way to package it in a way that just feels comfortable for everybody that's using it.
Yeah, I think it's going to obviously make the assistant, I'm not going to say the name again, but it's going to make the assistant a much more competent, and especially if we're just like text-based and voice searches. Like that in and of itself is worth the upgrade, in my opinion, because it's just going to make those sorts of functions a lot more reliable and a lot more nuanced, a lot more straight to the point, getting the answers you're looking for, versus now it's a lot of vagueness with Siri, whether or not it even works or not. So
agreed. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the AI conversation. I was just curious to know what your thoughts were, because we hadn't really talked about it, and it has been kind of in the news over and over again. And with the M4 news, I was like, all right, now there's a little bit of relevance in the Apple world with this happening. But supposedly, it's going to debut on the new iPad Pro. So I know that we've hashed the iPad Pro, to Kingdom Come, what we think is going to happen and things like that. So I want to do something a little bit more playful in terms of maybe giving a top 3 wish list. They could be things that we know are probably going to happen, like an OLED display or something kind of crazy, more far-fetched, like a foldable iPad or something like that. So I figured let's do like a top 3 of a wish list. It could be hardware or software on the iPad, something that it currently doesn't have, of course. I guess I'll let you go first.
You already know what I'm going to say, man. You know what I'm going to say. User profiles. Like, until user profiles come, it's just hard to view the iPad as a contemporary, or like comparing to the Mac.
Yeah,
it needs user profiles. Well, I just don't know if they'll ever do that, because then that reduces the need to sell more hardware, to everyone to have their own individual iPad instead of the community iPad. So
because it's interesting. I know that especially like families with kids, they already had a community iPad. Like the use cases there. I feel like most people that use iPads aren't the professional setting like myself, where my iPad is my iPad and nobody else is really going to use it for anything else. But people with like 3 kids, I feel like that's a big use case. You buy an iPad Air, you give it to your 3 kids to share in the car. Like each one of them should have their own profile.
Yeah, I agree. And you would be able to take advantage of being able to recognize who's actually holding the iPad, for instance, and then switching to that profile. Or they already have that by, recognize your voice on iOS. Whenever you ask your HomePod for a certain thing, it responds based on that person's profile. So
agreed. No, that's nice. I guess for me, a little bit more on the far-fetched side, I just want some sort of, I was going to say, just give me more customization on extended monitors and things like that. But I don't also just want to say, give me Mac OS on the iPad, but I want some sort of merge to happen. I want the best of both worlds on my iPad. What that means exactly, or what that would look like, I'm not sure, but I want to be able to have multiple monitors with my iPad, right? I want to be able to have the same Finder file system as opposed to the Files app on the iPad. But I don't want to take away from what the iPad is to me, which is a touch-first interface that keeps me honed in on one single application on the iPad. So I want some sort of Mac OS, iPad OS merge to happen. I know this is on the far-fetched side, like I mentioned, because Apple would just cannibalize both sides, I think, somehow by doing this. But I think it would be cool to see the OSs merge to the point where it is a one-to-one experience for the most part, right? You get the best of both. Kind of like how they brought, for some reason, Stage Manager to Mac OS, even though it's kind of useless on Mac OS. I want them to have that same idea, but give me the things that are useful, not the things that are not useful, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, It does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're there quite yet, but I think maybe 10 years down the line, we might actually get something like that.
That's true.
Hopefully. I want a similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want okay, so the windowing system. I want an improved windowing system. So it's very rigid now the way you
Okay.
multitask on the iPad. So just like the rumor of iOS 18 being able to put app icons anywhere
Yeah.
or having more freedom over your placement of app icons, I want more freedom of placement of windows. Like I want maybe to still be able to see my desktop or my home screen while a window's on top of that.
Yeah.
And then having another window there, being able to move those around, resize, and not just where both windows take up 100% of the screen, like being able to resize a small window, a big window. Yeah, that's what I would like to see. I think that would make the iPad a lot more useful, and
Mm-hmm.
it would make it quicker to get things done and to move files between applications and things like that.
So I mean, I fully agree with you. Like I like the stride that they made towards Stage Manager and the floating windows, and with iPad OS, I believe it was 16 or maybe even 17 this year, the ability to customize it into more sizes for Stage Manager. Because when Stage Manager first got released, it could only be used in like 6 or 7 different predefined sizes. But now it's almost limitless, in my opinion. But
Oh,
yeah, I think
okay, yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah, but I agree with you that I don't like how the whole home screen just disappears behind those windows. It makes it feel like a different experience, and I feel like just leaving your home screen alone and having windows float over your home screen, being able to minimize them into your dock and move stuff around, I think that would make people more comfortable using an iPad because it's just more familiar, like you said. So, wish list number 2. I'm going kind of far fetched because why not? I would love for there to be like some sort of. I guess the iPad is already kind of modular with the Magic Keyboard, but give me some sort of like modularity aspect to it with magnets on the back, right? So like using those pin connectors to be able to uh, magnetically attach maybe more hard drive space or a bigger battery or um, maybe some sort of like enhanced GPU system or something like that. Like being able to modulate, like yeah, use modularity to enhance your iPad when you need to enhance it. So it could still be your thin iPad when you want it to be, but if you want it to be a little bit more robust and have additional GPU cores or be able to have more RAM or something like that for an intensive task, like give me more functionality with those pin connectors because I think you could definitely do more with pin connectors, especially with new ones that might be coming out. We might be getting more pin connectors with the new iPad Pro. Being able to just have like a cool modularity ecosystem would be interesting, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you'll never get RAM upgrades or storage upgrades though, because you know how it
Yeah.
goes. All right, so here's what I want. Here's my final number 3,
Uh-huh.
and this may sound a little far fetched, but I don't think it's as far fetched as it may seem on the surface.
Okay,
Okay,
let's get it.
and this applies to both the Mac and the iPad, by the
Ooh.
way.
Okay.
So I want Vision Pro like gestures with my iPad
Ooh.
and Mac. I want to be able to do like that and actually move windows like right now on my screen, like do that
Wow.
and move windows around.
Yeah. That would be
It would be
sick.
so cool. Like you would be able to type on an external keyboard. You could be far away from your like imagine the studio display, like a big monitor,
Uh-huh.
and being able to do like manipulate content on screen
That'd be
just like
crazy.
that.
And I mean, it can't be that far fetched, right?
Mm-mm.
Because I mean, there's
Yeah,
cameras on the front. I mean, maybe they would need to add like a second camera under the front of the iPad but it's got the
they would have to
sensors.
probably have to have several cameras
Yeah.
up top there. Like, yeah, but I just think that that would be really cool. Like to be able to actually move and interact with stuff using like just gestures with your hand.
Yeah, because I can see because I have two screens in front of me. I can like grab you, move you over that way while I'm like
Mm-hmm.
looking something up, as opposed to like hunching over. First world problems, hunching over, grabbing my mouse, moving you around. So no, that'd be cool. I definitely agree with that one. And then I guess my last one, hmm, I think getting a full-fledged version, not a watered-down version of Final Cut Pro, and then using whatever iPad OS 18's new AI assistant's going to be to help you get stuff done quicker. I think that's a little bit more on the realistic side, honestly. That maybe could happen down the road.
I
But
think we'll see touch gestures before that.
nah, get out of here.
I think we'll
We
see.
already have Final
We'll
Cut
see.
Pro sort of on the iPad, and then
Yeah.
iPadOS 18 with the M4 could give us some sort of AI assistant, kind of like the OG Microsoft like paperclip, but just like
Man, I'm gonna have mind control over my Mac before Final Cut becomes like that app on the iPad.
yeah, I mean yeah, Final Cut. You played with Final Cut, right? On the iPad?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty
It's
watered down.
good, but I mean, it's really watered down.
Yeah.
Like really watered. Like they just got some features last year that I was like shocked that it
It didn't
wasn't
have.
already there
Yeah.
when it was announced. Yeah.
I think the only cool part about it, or the unique part, is the like live animations and live effects, basically with the Apple Pencil. That's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
that is cool. That is cool. Mhm.
But outside of that, it's just iMovie in a different UI.
iMovie Plus.
Yeah, iMovie Plus. So I mean, yeah, I guess that's really making me think that I know people complain about it, but the iPad's pretty well rounded if you think about it.
I mean, it's not even recognizable compared to the first iteration
Yeah.
of iOS for the iPad.
Right?
Like it's night and day difference, but it's just so funny because they can take such a big leap, but it's still so far away.
Mhm.
Like it still feels like
But far away from
there
what?
needs to be.
Like, I guess everybody's argument is that they just want Mac OS on the iPad. It's like give me Mac OS on the iPad and I'll be happy.
I don't want Mac OS. I just want to reduce friction. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with people who like knock it, but they say, "Oh, I don't want Mac OS on the iPad." Okay, that's true, but if you put a Final Cut Pro user on a Mac and a Final Cut Pro user on an iPad and set them side by side with the same video,
Mm-hmm.
the same capabilities, who's going to get done first?
Yeah. I'm assuming the Mac OS one.
By a
Oh,
large
yeah.
margin. Yeah.
I guess you're right. It isn't really a feature set stand. It is, you're right. It's a friction standpoint because as of right now, I use my iPad pretty much for like one thing, and that's for video and thumbnail editing. Because everything else, and if I stray away from it, it does feel tedious to get something done. It feels like harder to do something. Even if something as simple as like opening up Slack and like messaging in our chat. Why? I don't really know. It's just everything is just a little bit slower because it takes 1 or 2 or 3 extra steps. And you're right. I think reducing friction is the name of the game to make the iPad the end all be all.
Not being afraid of stealing from the Mac either.
Yeah.
Like there are some things that the Mac does, and it does it for a reason because it's the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying that iPad OS should be Mac OS. Make it iPad OS, but get rid of all the friction. Get rid of the stuff and that requires thinking outside the box. Maybe it requires a different input paradigm.
Yeah.
Maybe it requires the whole touch gesture thing. I don't know, but there's got to be some way to make it to reduce the friction so that there's parity between the two as far as getting things done.
No, agreed. I like this conversation because it made me realize, like, hey, everything can be done on there. And I feel like Apple's thrown everything onto the iPad that they want to. But there is that, like, there's that barrier where it's like, it just makes everything harder. And I feel like Apple maybe did that by design to a certain extent, aside from, like, media consumption to make it easy for media consumption. But I don't know.
It feels like running through water. You ever try to run through water?
Yeah.
Like you can do it, but you're way slower, right? Than if
Yeah.
you're running just through air. And that's kind of what it feels like. Not to the same degree, obviously. That's a little dramatic, but it just feels like there's something there slowing you down just a little bit, enough to be noticeable and enough to make you want to go back to your Mac. And I'll just do this. I'll just use my Mac to do it.
Like, it looks cooler to use your iPad with the floating keyboard and the Apple Pencil and how thin it is and the form factor. But you're right. Let me just go back to tried and true. Let me go back to my laptop that's been the same since 1980. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the iPad, baby. So by this time, hopefully the next episode, we'll know exactly what Apple's given us. May 7th. I'm excited. I'm done with the guesses. Now just give me exactly what it actually is. I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
So this week, I just released a little walkthrough for the Translate app, and then I am working on some AirPod videos, some accessory videos, as well as kind of like some tips and tricks that I've been noticing. Because again, AirPods, like we mentioned, and I shouted out, I'm currently editing it, and I shouted out our podcast that we talked about it. AirPods Pro, probably the number one, aside from the iPhone, probably the best Apple product ever. So I mean, that'll do it for this video, everybody. Hopefully you have a good weekend. Leave some comments down below of what you guys want to see next in terms of for the iPad content. We got a lot of iPad content lined up. I think probably by next Friday it'll come out. We'll be able to get our hands on it. We'll get it alongside everybody else, right? I think that's like May 16th or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it launches on the 7th.
I bet you
And then
pre-orders
you pre-order that Friday. So you pre-order on the 10th, and then it comes out on the 17th.
I'm excited. I'll definitely be getting a large Pro and a large Air, and then seeing what happens after that.
Sweet. Still undecided here. I still have my 2 terabyte. I am like,
Apple gives you $300 for it.
Yeah, they'll give me $300 and like a kick in the backside.
That's crazy. All right, everybody. I mean, any last words for the people?
Go ahead and hit those memberships up, folks. Yeah. If you want to. Catch you next time.
Have a good weekend. Peace. Nice.
That was fun.
No, that was a good one.
Glad we didn't miss that.